Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. So today is going to be a little bit of a different video for me. I wanted to start a new series on my channel called Meet My Palettes, and I saw this trend going around Instagram and I thought about doing it on my Instagram, but I decided that I would rather just kind of sit down and talk about each of the palettes rather than just writing a post about them. So that is what we're going to be doing today. So the first palette that we are going to be talking about is my Shared Planet Tiger palette. I thought this one would be a really fun one to start out with, as it is one of my favorites in my collection and I just want to sit down and talk about it. So the way this video is going to work is I'm going to talk about the brand, the packaging, the color story, and then go through each of the individual shades, swatch them out for you, talk about what ones I like, what ones I don't like, and then I will end this video sharing some of the looks that I've created with this palette. So if that interests you, then keep on watching. So starting out with the brand of this palette, this is a brand that I discovered in 2019 and I really liked their palettes. They have two eyeshadow palettes. They have this one and then the Polar Bear palette. And I ended up purchasing the Tiger palette on Black Friday sale or something like that. I know I got it on sale. And it is originally $48. But I really just loved the whole idea of this palette, the color story, the message behind the brand, and tigers are also my favorite animal, so this one just kind of had a special place in my heart from the moment I first saw it. So Shared Planet is a brand that donates 10% of their proceeds to different charities around the world that help endangered animals, and I just thought that was really cool and something that I wanted to support, so I did purchase this palette. So starting with the packaging, this one is super heavy and it's probably like the heaviest packaging that I have in my collection, and it just makes it feel really high-end and just expensive, and I do really enjoy that. And then the actual packaging of this is super pretty. It has the kind of tropical plants on here that would be found within the tiger's habitat, and I just think it's really pretty, and I like that they didn't go with this bright orange packaging with the black stripes. Like, they kind of focus this palette on a tiger's habitat and the colors that would be found within that, and I thought that was a really nice take for this palette. So when you open it up, you have your 12 colors here. There are 6 mattes and 6 shimmers, which I think is a really nice mix. And then it also comes with a really nice mirror up here as well. So this packaging is super reflective, which does kind of make it hard to show. But I think you can get a pretty good look at the true colors right here. It definitely is nicer to look at it in person. I feel like that's how you get the best color payoff from these, and you can see the actual colors. So next I'm going to go through each of the individual shades. I will swatch them out and give my thoughts on each of them, but as far as the whole color story goes, I really enjoy it. I love the warm tones in here. I'm definitely a neutral girl at heart, so I really enjoy the overall color scheme in this palette. So I'm going to start right up top here with the shade Siberian, and this is just a basic matte shade, just a matte off-white shade. Doesn't really show up on my skin at all. I'm not really sure if you'll be able to see it, but I really enjoy when palettes have just a basic matte shade like this. I really like to use these shades for blending out or lightening up a look or just setting down my concealer, and I really appreciate it when palettes have this shade. there's not really much to say about the formula of this one, as it is just a basic off-white setting shade, but I do really enjoy that this palette has that option. So the next shade here is Tiger Eye, and this is a really pretty gold shade. So here you can see it swatched out. So this shade, I do like it. It's a bit of a chunkier formula for a shimmer, so that's not really my favorite. I prefer the shimmer formula in a couple of these other shades. This one's probably my least favorite shimmer formula. It's a bit chunkier than the other ones, and this isn't really a color that I typically wear on my eyes. Yellow golds aren't my favorite personally to wear. So this one, while it is a very pretty shade, it's not one that I get a ton of use out of, but I have found ways to make it work. So the next shade up here is the shade Whiskers, which is just a nice matte brown shade. There you can see it swatched out. So this is just a pretty basic matte shade, nice for the crease. I do wish that Whiskers and Fiery had a little bit more difference. This one is a bit darker than this one, but overall I feel like they look pretty similar on the eyes, and I do wish that there was a little bit more variation, but as far as the performance of it goes, I do think it is really nice. The next shade we have here is Paw Print. So this is just a nice pinky shimmer. I'll swatch it out here. So I'm not really sure how well you can actually see this swatch, but it's just a nice light pink color. I really do enjoy this. This one isn't as chunky as the Tiger Eye shade, which I do like. It is still a little bit on the chunky side, but it's definitely easier to work with, I feel like, than Tiger Eye. And I like the color of this one better as well. I'm much more likely to reach for a light pink shimmer over the yellow gold. So this one is one of my favorite shades in this palette for that reason. So next up we have the shade Fiery. So this is the one that I was saying looks somewhat similar to Whiskers. It's a little bit darker, you can see. And swatched out, it does look darker as well, but on the eyes sometimes blending out, they can tend to look a bit more similar in tone and color, which is fine. I mean, there's not much variety when it comes to warm matte browns that you can create. I just wish there was just a slightest bit more difference between the two shades, but swatched out, you can tell that they do look different, and this one is definitely darker. It's just on the eyes, what I have experienced, they do tend to look a little bit more similar, but the performance of this one, once again, is really nice, and I do enjoy using it as a deeper transition shade. So next up is a fun pop of color in the palette. This is the shade Lush. And this one is a beautiful green shade, but it also has flecks of gold in it to make it a little bit more wearable. So there's that shade swatched out. I think it is such a pretty shade. Not one that I use all that often just because it is still a green shade, and green isn't a color that I wear on a daily basis, but I have found ways to make it work, and you will see in one of the looks that I show later on a way that I kind of made this a bit more wearable. But this is a really pretty shade. This one isn't as chunky of a shimmer like I was saying with the Tiger Eye shade, so I do enjoy that as well. So next up we have the shade Roar, which is the shimmery white shade in this palette. And this one, once again, is a bit of that chunkier formula. that I'm not a huge fan of, but it still performs well. So there's that shade swatched out. It's a very pretty shade, and it has different shifts to it. You can see like a bit of a gold and a pink shift within this shade. I do really enjoy using this in my inner corner, and it's definitely probably the shade that I will use up the fastest just because it is a chunkier formula, and I do use it almost every time I create a look with this just to pop it in the inner corner. But like I said, the formula of this one is not my favorite, as it is the chunkier formula, but you can see after smoothing it out a little bit, it does get a little bit smoother and not as chunky. So next up is the shade Claude, and this one is a matte red shade. I have noticed with this shade, however, it doesn't show up super red on the eyes. It tends to get a little bit more of just a reddish brown shade, which is fine. I don't mind the shade at all. I still think it's really pretty. I just wish a little bit more of the red showed through, because when I first got this palette and was trying it out, I was really excited that it had this pop of red in there, and I do just wish it showed up a little bit more, but it is still a pretty shade and it does perform nicely. I just wish it looked closer to the actual color in the pan. Okay, next up is the shade Shere Khan right here. So this is a shade that I didn't actually think I was gonna like that much in this palette, but it turned out to be one of my actual favorite shades in this palette. I think it is so pretty, and it works really well as like an outer corner shade to deepen up looks. I like to pair it with paw print on the inner half of the lid and pack this in the outer half, and I think that creates a really pretty look. And I just really fell in love with the shade, and this one is probably the best shimmer formula out of this palette. I think it is the smoothest, has the finest shimmer, and I think it is really pretty. So the next shade we have is the shade Predator, and this is the darkest brown shade in this palette. Here's what it looks like on the finger, and then swatched out. So this one is a nice dark matte brown, and I really do enjoy this one to deepen up looks, and I like the gradient from the lightest to dark matte shades in this palette, and I think it was a really nice selection of matte shades to pair with these shimmers. The formula of this one, once again, I haven't had any problems with it. I think they perform really nicely and blend out pretty easily. So next up we have the shade Bangle right here, and this one is a bit of an orangey rose shade. It's a pretty unique shade in my collection, I would have to say. I think it's super pretty. The shimmer formula on this one as well, I feel like matches up to Shere Khan with the finer shimmer, and I really do enjoy that. This isn't a shade that I use all that often, just with the color of it, but it is a very, very pretty shade, and I definitely do want to get more use out of it in the future, and I don't really have any complaints with this shade. And then the final shade in here is the shade Stripes, and that is the matte black in this palette. So same with the Siberian shade. I really like when palettes have a matte black. I tend to use shades like that as a liner, and this one does perform pretty nicely. So there's it swatched out. So you can see it's a pretty pigmented black. Not the most pigmented in my collection, but it's definitely up there. And the performance of it does work really well, especially as a liner, which is how I typically use it. I have tried to use it as an outer corner shade, which you will see in one of the looks in a little bit. And it's okay, it can tend to look a little muddied if you're not careful, but I do really enjoy this shade as well. And like I said, I love it when palettes have a matte black that I could use as either a deepening shade or as a liner, which is typically how I use this one. So I do really enjoy having this shade in the palette, and just this whole color story I feel like works really well together and offers you your nice staple matte shades along with some beautiful pops for the shimmers, and I just really, really enjoy this palette. So I have used this palette quite a few times since I got it, and my most used shade in this palette would definitely be Siberian. I know you probably can't tell, all these shades are so hard pressed that you can't really see much progress when using them, but I have used that one quite a bit, and it is the easiest shade for me to use just to pack it all over the lid or to help blend things out. So that one is definitely my most used in this palette. My least used shades would be Tiger Eye and Lush. I have only used those two a handful of times since getting this palette, and it's definitely something I need to work on. I do really want to focus on using these shades more, as they are super pretty. Even if they're a little bit out of my comfort zone, I do still really enjoy them and want to get some good use out of them. As far as my favorite shade in this palette goes, I think I would have to say Shere Khan, which really surprised me. Like I was saying earlier, this wasn't a shade that I expected to love as much as I do, but I would definitely have to say this one has turned into my favorite shade in this palette. My least favorite shade, if you couldn't guess, would be Tiger Eye, just because the shimmer formula is chunkier like I had been saying, and yellow golds just really aren't something that I tend to wear on my eyes all that often. But there isn't really a bad shade in here, it's just really personal preference when it comes to this palette. Some people probably absolutely love this shade, and I can see why. It's just personally not my favorite shade. So that concludes kind of going through each of these shades individually, and now I think I want to get into sharing some of the looks that I created. So I only have 5 looks to share with this palette so far. And this first one is the very first look that I created using this palette. It's nothing super special. I just really wanted to test out some of the shadows and see how they performed. So I just did a super simple everyday look with the palette, and I really did enjoy the shades and how they blended, how they performed. Like I was mentioning when going through each individual shade, some of the shimmers are a bit chunkier, but on the eyes they do look pretty good, and there's not really much else I have to say about this look, but it was the very first look I created with this palette. This next look is probably my favorite look that I've done, and I saw this style of look from a YouTube video, I believe, and I really wanted to recreate that with this palette. And this is kind of where I fell in love with Shere Khan as well, as that's the shade that's all over the lid pretty much. And I just really thought this was a super cool look, and really just fell in love even more with this palette and the shades in here, and I just really had a lot of fun creating this look. So this is my third look that I have to share today, and I really liked creating this look as well. This is another one that was inspired by someone I saw on Instagram. They did a look similar to this, and I wanted to recreate it with this palette, and it really reminds me of like changing leaves in the fall time. And I do think this is a really nice palette for fall, with the kind of darker warm toned mattes and that green really just make it a really pretty fall tone palette. and I really did enjoy this look as well and thought it was a lot of fun to create. This next look is a little bit more on the neutral side. I mean, all of these looks are pretty neutral as this is a very neutral palette, but this one I wanted to play around with Lush, the green shade, and see if I could make that shade more wearable than just a green. So I believe what I did with this one is I put Lush on the first 2/3 of the lid, and then I tapped Tiger Eye over it just to bring out more of the gold in it. So you can still see a hint of the green, but I feel like putting Tiger Eye over it just made it more wearable, and I really did enjoy this look. And then the final look I have to share with you all is this kind of evening glam type of look is what I was going for, with stripes, the matte black in the outer corner, and then paw print is, I believe, what's on the first half of the lid. And I also used this look to kind of figure out how stripes worked as a deepening shade, because some matte blacks are definitely harder to blend out, and this one is okay. It can start to look a little muddy if you're not careful, but as far as matte blacks go, I do really enjoy this one, and I really liked the outcome of this look as well. So that will conclude this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and let me know if you would like to see me do this with some of my other palettes. I really enjoyed creating this video. I think it's just nice to sit down and consciously look at a palette and see what shades I use, what shades I don't, and how I like to use some of them. And I just wanted to share my thoughts with you all today. So let me know if this is something you would like to see in the future, and be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you did enjoy it, and also subscribe so you don't miss out on any future uploads. And with that, I will see you all in my next video. Bye!